Ethan was the kind of boy everyone in school knew, not because of his kindness or talent, but because of his attitude. He walked through the school hallways like he owned the place. His shoes were always clean, his hair was perfectly styled, and his confident smile never left his face. Teachers often said he had potential, but Ethan never really listened. He thought he already knew everything. He was the kind of student who spoke loudly in class, made jokes about others, and always had a group of friends laughing behind him. They admired him not for being good, but for being fearless. Ethan enjoyed the attention. It made him feel powerful, like no one could touch him. When someone dropped their books in the hallway, he was the first to make a sarcastic comment. If a shy student tried to answer a question in class, he would whisper jokes and make others giggle. He didn't care how people felt. He only cared that people noticed him. Deep down, Ethan wasn't truly happy on her, but he didn't even realize it. He thought popularity meant success. He thought respect came from fear. At home, things were different. His parents were often busy. His father worked long hours and his mother was usually tired. They loved him, but they hardly had time to talk. Ethan didn't share his feelings with them. Instead, he found comfort in being the cool guy at school. It was his way of hiding his loneliness. Every morning when he looked in the mirror, he told himself he was better than everyone else. That belief gave him confidence, but it also made him cruel. He wasn't evil. He just didn't understand what kindness really meant. He thought being strong meant making others feel weak. One day during lunch break, a new student accidentally spilled juice on Ethan's shirt. The cafeteria went silent for a moment. Everyone waited to see what would happen. Ethan looked down at his stained shirt, then at the nervous boy holding an empty cup. Without thinking twice, he smirked and said, "Are you blind or just stupid?" His friends burst into laughter. The new boy apologized over and over, but Ethan ignored him. He pushed the tray aside and walked away proudly, as if he had done something impressive. That was Ethan, proud, bold, and heartless when it came to others. But somewhere inside he had a small voice that sometimes whispered, "You shouldn't have done that." He ignored it every time. He told himself the world was harsh, and people had to be tough to survive. Teachers often tried to guide him. One day his English teacher, Mrs. Thompson, kept him after class. She said softly, "Ethan, you're smart, but you waste your energy hurting people instead of helping them." Ethan laughed and replied, "I'm just having fun, ma'am. It's not my fault they take it seriously." Mrs. Thompson sighed. She saw something in him, a spark that could become greatness if he ever learned to care. But Ethan wasn't ready to listen. His friends admired how fearless he was, but even they sometimes felt uncomfortable. They laughed with him but never laughed at him. They didn't dare. Deep down, they knew Ethan's temper could turn on anyone. If someone disagreed with him, he'd tease them until they gave in. Outside of school, Ethan enjoyed showing off too. He'd walk with his friends through the neighborhood, making loud jokes, tossing pebbles, or laughing at strangers who looked different. He never thought about how those people felt. He thought the world revolved around him. But things were about to change soon, and he had no idea. Life was quietly preparing a lesson for him, one that would shake the very confidence he was so proud of. That week, Ethan had a big argument with his father. His dad told him he needed to start being more responsible and stop behaving like a troublemaker. Ethan yelled back, saying his father didn't understand him. The argument ended with slammed doors and silence. Ethan stormed out of the house furious. As he walked down the street, he kicked a stone and muttered to himself, "Nobody tells me what to do." At that moment, he saw a group of younger kids playing near the sidewalk. One of them accidentally bumped into him while running. Ethan snapped instantly, shouting, "Watch where you're going, kid." The boy looked scared and apologized. Ethan rolled his eyes and walked away. He didn't notice that an elderly woman sitting nearby shook her head sadly, watching his behavior. That old lady would soon become a part of Ethan's life in a way he could never imagine. But for now, he didn't care. He had no idea that within a few days she would be the one to teach him the most powerful lesson of his life, a lesson that would change his heart forever. As the sun began to set, Ethan leaned against a wall outside a convenience store, scrolling through his phone and laughing at memes his friends sent. He didn't realize how empty his laughter really was. His life looked full from the outside, but inside something important was missing: kindness, empathy, and understanding. He thought he was in control, that he could handle anyone or anything. But destiny was watching, waiting for the right moment to show him that power doesn't come from fear. It comes from compassion. And that moment would arrive very soon, in the form of a quiet, fragile-looking old lady whom he was about to underestimate. The next day was warm and sunny, one of those afternoons when the whole town seemed to slow down. School had just ended and students were pouring out of the gates, laughing, shouting, and making weekend plans. Ethan and his group of friends were among the loudest. They were walking down the street, tossing a soda can between them like a ball, laughing at silly jokes and feeling untouchable, as usual. At the corner of Maple Street there was a busy crosswalk that led to a small park. Cars lined up on both sides, waiting for the signal to change. The sound of honking mixed with chatter, footsteps, and the rustle of trees. Ethan and his friend stood there, impatiently waiting for the light to turn green. That's when they noticed her. An old lady, small and frail, wearing a faded gray coat and holding a wooden cane, slowly stepped onto the crosswalk. Her movements were careful, each step measured. She clutched a small handbag close to her chest. Her hair was silver, her face lined with years of stories. But there was something peaceful about her, something gentle that most people would notice and instantly respect. But not Ethan. He glanced at his friends and grinned. "Oh great," he said sarcastically. "We'll be here all day." His friends laughed quietly, but no one said anything to stop him. He started tapping his foot impatiently. Cars began honking louder, and the old woman paused for a moment, turning her head slightly in confusion. Instead of showing patience, Ethan rolled his eyes and shouted, "Come on, Grandma. Some of us have places to be." A few people nearby looked at him disapprovingly, but he didn't care. He loved attention, even the wrong kind. The old lady didn't respond. She just kept walking, her cane tapping softly against the pavement. The world seemed to slow down around her, but for Ethan, every second felt like an eternity. His friends whispered, "Leave her alone, man." But Ethan wasn't listening. When the light finally turned red again, trapping the cars for another cycle, Ethan groaned loudly. He decided to walk past her, to show off, to make his friends laugh again. As he passed, the old lady accidentally brushed his arm with her handbag. It was barely a touch, light as a feather, but Ethan snapped. He turned around sharply and said, "Watch it." His tone was sharp, cutting through the air. The old woman looked up at him, surprised but calm. Her eyes were kind, the kind of eyes that carried wisdom and patience. That calmness only irritated Ethan more. "Are you deaf or just slow?" he said cruelly, smirking as his friends giggled nervously behind him. Then, without thinking, he gave her a small shove, not strong enough to hurt, but enough to make her stumble slightly. Her cane wobbled and her bag almost fell. Gasps echoed from a few onlookers. A woman nearby shouted, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" For a split second, time froze. The old lady straightened herself, holding her cane tightly. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She simply looked at Ethan, not with anger, but with disappointment so deep it pierced through his pride like a needle through fabric. Her eyes said everything. Ethan's smirk faded. He expected her to shout or hit back, but she just stood there quietly, like someone who had seen much worse in life. That silence was heavier than any punishment. His friends shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or walk away. Then, something unexpected happened. A black SUV pulled up to the side of the road. The doors opened quickly and two men in suits stepped out. They moved with urgency, rushing toward the old lady. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one of them asked respectfully. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Ethan blinked in confusion. "Wait, what's going on?" he muttered under his breath. The men ignored him completely. One of them gently took the lady's arm, helping her steady herself. Then Ethan heard one of the men say, "We're so sorry this happened, Madam Principal. Let's get you back to the car." The words hit him like a brick. Madam Principal. He froze, his friends went silent. People started whispering, realizing who she was. The retired founder and former principal of their very own school. The woman who had built the education center, started scholarships for underprivileged kids, and was loved by generations of students and parents. Ethan's throat went dry. His heart started pounding. His body felt cold all of a sudden. 10 seconds earlier, he had laughed at her. Now every drop of pride inside him began to melt into shame. The old lady turned her eyes back to him one last time. There was no hatred in her expression, just quiet sadness. That look hurt more than anger ever could. Ethan wanted to speak, to apologize, but his voice refused to come out. His friends slowly stepped back, embarrassed to even stand near him. The people around began recording the scene, shaking their heads in disbelief for the first time in his life. Ethan wished he could disappear. He realized in that single moment that he hadn't just insulted an old woman. He had disrespected someone who had spent her entire life helping others, maybe even helping his own teachers become who they were today. And within just 10 seconds, the fearless school bully felt smaller than he ever had before. The world around Ethan seemed to stop moving. The sound of cars, the chatter of people, even the laughter of his friends, it all faded into a strange, heavy silence. His heart was pounding, not from anger this time, but from something unfamiliar. Fear. The old lady stood still, holding her cane tightly, her calm face showing no sign of fear or hate. Her eyes, however, told a story of disappointment, quiet strength, and deep understanding. It was as if she could see right through Ethan, past his fake confidence and into the insecure boy hiding beneath it. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Her eyes held him in place. For the first time, he felt truly exposed. The two men who had rushed out of the SUV were now standing beside her protectively. One of them glared at Ethan and said firmly, "Young man, do you even know who this woman is?" Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth went dry, his palms sweaty. He glanced at his friends, hoping for support, but they had already stepped back. No one was laughing anymore. The man continued, his voice low but sharp. "You just pushed the founder of your school, the woman who built it from nothing, who gave hundreds of students a chance at a better life. Including kids like you." Those words hit Ethan like lightning. Founder? His mind couldn't process it. He had heard about her in morning assemblies. Stories about a strong, kind principal who had retired years ago after dedicating her life to education. He had seen her picture on the wall near the principal's office, smiling warmly, holding a book with the words "Knowledge with Compassion" written beneath it. And now, that same woman stood right in front of him, the one he had just shoved. A strange feeling crept up Ethan's chest, guilt. Real guilt. The kind he had never felt before. His throat tightened and he opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. The old lady, still calm, gently raised her hand to stop the man from scolding him further. "It's all right," she said softly. Her voice was calm but carried authority, the kind of voice that instantly silenced everyone. "He's just a boy who hasn't yet learned what true strength means." Her words were kind, but they cut deeper than anger ever could. Ethan felt his chest tighten even more. He had hurt someone who didn't even want to hurt him back. That calm forgiveness made him feel even smaller. A few people in the crowd were filming everything. Others whispered things like, "That's the old principal," and "That boy's in serious trouble." Ethan's face turned red. His pride, which once made him feel taller than everyone else, now made him wish he could sink into the ground and disappear. The old lady turned to the men and said gently, "Please help me get to the car." They nodded and supported her as she began to walk slowly again. Every step of her cane echoed in Ethan's ears like a heartbeat. Steady, calm, forgiving. He stood frozen. His friends tried to whisper something like, "Let's just go, man." But Ethan didn't move. His body refused to obey. His mind kept replaying the moment he pushed her. The way she stumbled, the way her bag nearly fell, the way her calm eyes looked at him. He wanted to take it all back. But time doesn't move backward. When the car door closed and the SUV started to drive away, Ethan finally whispered to himself, "What have I done?" His voice cracked slightly. His friends looked at him with mixed expressions, guilt, shock, maybe even disappointment. None of them dared to laugh now. As the crowd dispersed, a middle-aged man who had seen the whole incident walked past Ethan and said quietly, "Son, respect is not given to you by fear. It's earned through how you treat others. Remember that." Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't. The man's words hit too close to home. He began walking toward home slowly, his steps heavy. The streets felt quieter than usual, the sunlight harsher, and every sound around him seemed distant. His mind kept echoing the old lady's words. He's just a boy who hasn't yet learned what true strength means. For the first time, he realized how wrong he had been all along. He thought being feared was the same as being respected. He thought teasing people made him powerful. But now, standing there with a weight pressing on his heart, he saw that true strength wasn't about control. It was about kindness. When he reached home, he didn't even greet his parents. He went straight to his room, sat on his bed, and stared at the wall. The silence was deafening. His reflection in the mirror didn't look powerful anymore. It looked tired, ashamed. He replayed the moment over and over again, the touch of her cane, her calm eyes, her quiet forgiveness. And with each replay, his chest ached a little more. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept wondering why she didn't shout, why she didn't scold him, why she forgave him so easily. Maybe she had seen hundreds of students like him before, proud, lost, and desperate for attention. Maybe she understood something about him that even he didn't. He didn't know it yet, but this single moment, that one careless shove, was the beginning of the biggest change in his life. The boy who once walked through school halls with arrogance would soon learn the true meaning of humility, regret, and redemption. And all it took was 10 seconds. And a quiet old lady with a kind heart. That night, Ethan couldn't escape the image of the old lady's face. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, the calm eyes, the gentle voice, and that line echoing over and over in his head. He's just a boy who hasn't yet learned what true strength means. The words felt heavier each time they replayed. He had been called many things before, cool, confident, fearless, but never a boy who hadn't learned. It stung, not because it was harsh, but because it was true. He turned on his bed, staring at the ceiling. The glow from the streetlight outside painted soft lines across his room. For the first time, Ethan felt small in his own world. The same world he once ruled with laughter and mockery. He remembered the look on people's faces that day. The crowd's silence, his friends' nervous glances, the man's sharp voice asking, "Do you even know who this woman is?" He had been so proud of being fearless, but in that moment he hadn't been brave at all. He had been cruel. Ethan sat up, his heart racing again as if it were happening all over. He whispered to himself, "Why did I do that?" His voice cracked. There was no one to answer. He got up and walked to his desk. There, beside his books and messy notebooks, was a small photo of his school, the same school that woman had built. He picked it up slowly, realizing for the first time that her name, engraved below the school's logo, was Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. He stared at the name for a long time. Mrs. Hayes, the founder, the respected principal everyone had talked about in assemblies. Teachers often shared stories about her kindness, about how she helped students pay their fees, encouraged them to dream bigger, and treated everyone equally. She had dedicated her life to children like him, and he had shoved her. His throat tightened again. He dropped the photo on the desk and covered his face with his hands. For the first time in years, Ethan cried, not out of anger or frustration, but out of pure regret. Silent tears rolled down his cheeks as the weight of his actions finally sank in. He thought about how she had looked at him, not with hate, but with disappointment. That made it worse. If she had yelled or called the police, he might have felt justified in defending himself. But her silence had left him no place to hide. It forced him to face himself. The next morning, Ethan could barely look in the mirror. The reflection staring back at him didn't look like the cool guy anymore. It looked tired, guilty, and unsure. He went to school quietly, hoping no one would bring up the incident. But the whispers had already started. Did you hear what he did? He shoved the old principal. She forgave him. Can you believe that? Every whisper felt like a needle. His friends avoided his gaze. Even the teachers looked at him differently. Not angry, just disappointed. That was worse. During lunch, Ethan sat alone for the first time in a long while. The cafeteria was full of chatter, but to him it felt painfully quiet. He could see his reflection in the glass window, and the person he saw didn't feel like Ethan anymore. He remembered how proud he used to be walking down these halls, laughing, joking, showing off. Now every corner reminded him of how small one bad choice could make someone feel. Later that day, he was called to the principal's office. His heart sank. As he walked down the hallway, it felt like everyone was watching. The walk that once gave him pride now felt like punishment. When he entered the office, the current principal, Mr. Lewis, sat behind his desk, his face calm but serious. On the table was a cup of tea, and beside it, a letter. "Sit down, Ethan," Mr. Lewis said. Ethan obeyed quietly. He couldn't meet his eyes. Mr. Lewis took a deep breath and said, "Mrs. Hayes came to see me this morning. She told me what happened yesterday." Ethan's chest tightened. "Sir, but Mr. Lewis raised his hand to stop him. "She didn't ask me to punish you. In fact, she asked me to forgive you. She said you reminded her of many young students she once taught. Lost, proud, but capable of change." Ethan looked up slowly, shocked. "She forgave me?" he whispered. Mr. Lewis nodded. "She believes you can do better, but it's up to you to prove her right." Those words hit him hard. He didn't know why she would still believe in him, not after what he did. For a moment his eyes stung, but he quickly looked down, embarrassed to cry in front of his principal. Mr. Lewis slid the letter toward him. "She left this for you." Ethan hesitated, then unfolded the paper carefully. The handwriting was neat, elegant, and old-fashioned. The letter was short, but every word felt powerful. "Dear Ethan, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we do after them. You don't lose respect by apologizing, you gain it. True strength is not in how loud you are, but in how kind you can be. I hope one day you'll remember that strength and use it to help others, not hurt them." Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. Ethan read the letter again and again. Each sentence felt like a mirror reflecting everything he had refused to see about himself. When he finally looked up, his voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, I want to apologize to her." "In person," Mr. Lewis nodded. "That would be a good start." Ethan left the office that day with the letter clutched tightly in his hand. The wind outside was cool, and for the first time, he noticed how peaceful the world could be when he wasn't trying to prove something. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of his real transformation, not forced by punishment, but guided by the quiet forgiveness of a woman who had shown him what true strength really meant. The next morning felt different for Ethan. The world outside seemed softer, quieter. The same streets he used to walk through with arrogance now looked unfamiliar, as if everything had changed overnight. Or maybe it wasn't the world that changed. Maybe it was him. He hadn't slept much. Mrs. Hayes's letter had kept him awake all night. He'd read it at least 10 times, tracing every word like it was a secret message meant only for him. "You don't lose respect by apologizing, and you gain it." That line echoed in his head until dawn. After school, Ethan decided to do something he never thought he'd do: visit her. He didn't tell anyone, not even his friends. He just tucked the letter safely into his backpack and started walking toward the small community center the principal had mentioned. The walk felt long. Every step carried a mix of guilt, fear, and hope. His heart raced with questions. What would she say? Would she even want to see him? Would she still forgive him after all the embarrassment he caused? When he reached the community center, the building looked old but welcoming. The walls were painted light blue, and there were flower pots by the door. A hand-painted sign read, "Hayes Learning Home, Education for All Ages." Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at the name, Hayes. His chest tightened. He slowly pushed the door open. Inside, a few children were sitting at small tables, drawing pictures and reading books. The room smelled of paper, chalk, and hope. A volunteer looked up and smiled. "Can I help you? I'm here to see Mrs. Hayes," Ethan said quietly. The volunteer nodded and pointed toward a small reading area near the window. There she was, the same woman he had disrespected, sitting peacefully in a wooden chair, reading a book to a little girl. Sunlight streamed through the window, wrapping her in a warm glow. She looked gentle, calm, and strong, like time itself had slowed down around her. Ethan's throat tightened. He waited until she finished reading, then slowly walked closer. "Ma'am?" he said softly. Mrs. Hayes looked up. For a moment she seemed surprised, then she smiled. A warm, patient smile that made him feel both comforted and guilty at the same time.
Ethan," she said.
"I wondered when you'd come." Her voice was calm, as if nothing bad had ever happened. That kindness hit him harder than anger ever could. He took a deep breath and said, I came to say sorry for what I did. I was stupid and rude, and I didn't think. I don't even know why I acted that way. I feel terrible." Mrs. Hayes looked at him for a long moment, then gently closed the book. "Ethan," she said softly, "sometimes people act cruelly because they don't understand the pain they cause. It doesn't make them evil, and it makes them lost." He lowered his head, ashamed. "I was lost then," he whispered. "I know," she said kindly. But the fact that you're here today means you're finding your way back." They sat in silence for a moment. The sound of children laughing in the background filled the room with warmth. Then Mrs. Hayes spoke again, her tone gentle but serious. "Do you know why I was at that crosswalk that day?" Ethan shook his head. "I was returning from the school district office," she explained. "I had gone there to sign papers for a scholarship fund, one that helps students from struggling families pay for their studies." Ethan looked up slowly, confused. "You're still doing that? Even after retiring?" She smiled faintly. "Education never retires, dear. And that fund, it was created for students like you." Ethan blinked. "Like me?" "Yes," she nodded. "Your father applied for that same fund years ago when you were in middle school. The school used that fund to help him cover your early tuition. You may not remember, but that was me. I approved it." Ethan's eyes widened. "You helped my family?" His voice cracked as the realization sank in. Mrs. Hayes smiled again, her eyes glistening softly. "I didn't help your family. I helped a family that needed support, just like I would help any other. I never expected anything in return. I only hoped the children we helped would grow into kind, strong people who make the world better." Ethan couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears filled his eyes. "And I treated you like that." He covered his face, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't know." Mrs. Hayes gently reached out and placed a wrinkled hand on his shoulder. "Now you do," she said softly. "And knowing is the first step toward becoming better." For a long time they sat there, the old principal and the boy who had once shoved her. There were no more apologies needed. The silence between them said everything words couldn't. Before he left, Mrs. Hayes handed him a small notebook. "Take this," she said. "It's empty. Fill it with the lessons you learn. Not the ones from school, but the ones from life. They'll matter more in the end." Ethan took it carefully as if it were something sacred. "Thank you," he said quietly. As he walked out of the community center, the sunlight hit his face, and for the first time in a long while, he smiled, not his usual confident grin, but a soft, honest smile that came from somewhere deep inside. He looked down at the notebook and whispered to himself, "This time, I'll make her proud." And for the first time, he truly meant it. That night, Ethan sat by his window holding the small notebook Mrs. Hayes had given him. The moonlight spilled softly across the pages, blank, waiting for his story to begin again. He ran his fingers over the cover, thinking about her words. Fill it with the lessons you learn, not the ones from school, but the ones from life. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel proud or cool or powerful. He just felt human, and strangely, that felt better than all the fake confidence he had ever shown. He opened the notebook and wrote one sentence. "True strength is kindness." It was short, but it felt like a promise. The next morning, Ethan woke up early. The world outside felt different, brighter maybe, or maybe his heart was lighter. He walked to school quietly, without his usual group of friends. He didn't even put on his headphones. For once, he wanted to hear the sounds of the morning, the birds, the chatter of kids, the rustle of leaves. It felt peaceful, and he realized he had ignored that peace for too long. When he reached school, people still whispered about the incident. He could feel their eyes following him, but he didn't blame them. He deserved it. Instead of fighting back, he just kept walking, calm, quiet, focused. In class, he didn't crack jokes or interrupt. He listened. He actually listened. His teacher, Mrs. Thompson, noticed the change. She didn't say anything at first, but when the class ended, she gently stopped him. "Ethan," she said softly, "you seem different." He looked down, then smiled faintly. "I guess I finally started learning something worth learning," he replied. Mrs. Thompson smiled, the kind of proud smile teachers give when they know a student has grown. "Good," she said. "Keep going. Change is never easy, but it's always possible." The rest of the week, Ethan tried small things, real things. He helped a student pick up her fallen books in the hallway. He apologized to a boy he had once teased. He stayed after class to clean up the desks. Nobody told him to do it. He just did, and for the first time, doing something right felt better than showing off. At first, people thought it was an act. Some even laughed behind his back. But Ethan didn't react. He knew now that real change doesn't need an audience. One afternoon, he passed by the same crosswalk where it had all happened. The traffic lights blinked lazily in the sunlight. He stood there for a while, staring at the exact spot where Mrs. Hayes had stumbled. The memory hit him again, sharp, heavy, but this time not with guilt. With gratitude. That moment had broken him, but it had also rebuilt him into someone better. He took out his notebook and wrote a second line, "Mistakes don't define you, what you do after them does." As the weeks passed, the changes became real. Ethan started volunteering after school at the same community center where Mrs. Hayes worked. The first day he went, she looked pleasantly surprised. "You came back," she said warmly. "I said I'd make you proud." Ethan replied with a shy smile. She chuckled softly. "And you're doing just that." At the center, he helped kids with homework, stacked books, and read stories to the little ones. The same boy who once mocked others was now kneeling beside children, showing them how to spell words, how to solve math problems, how to dream. One day, a small boy tugged on his sleeve and asked, "Were you always nice?" Ethan laughed quietly. "No," he said honestly, "but someone kind showed me how to be." Mrs. Hayes overheard that and smiled from across the room. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Sometimes silence can say everything. At school, even his friends began to notice. One of them, Jake, walked up to him during lunch and said, "You've really changed, man." "What happened to you?" Ethan looked out the window thoughtfully and replied, "I met someone who showed me what strength really looks like." Jake frowned. "Who?" "An old lady with more courage than I'll ever have," Ethan said quietly. By the end of the semester, his teachers saw a new side of him. Polite, helpful, humble. His grades improved. He even joined a community outreach project that raised money for poor families, something Mrs. Hayes had started years ago. One evening, as he was locking up the classroom after an event, he saw Mrs. Hayes waiting near the door with her cane. "You've done well, Ethan," she said softly. He smiled. "I just wanted to give something back." She nodded, eyes glistening. "You already have." They stood there for a moment, the setting sun painting the sky in orange and gold. The world felt peaceful again, like a circle had finally closed. Before she left, Mrs. Hayes said something that Ethan would remember for the rest of his life. "Do you see, Ethan? It only takes one wrong act to hurt someone, but one right act can heal many hearts, including your own." Ethan nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, ma'am, for not giving up on me." She smiled kindly. "I never give up on good hearts. Some of them just take longer to find themselves." And as she walked away, Ethan felt something warm spread through his chest. Not pride this time, but peace. That night, he opened his notebook again and wrote his third lesson. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's the beginning of strength. He closed the book, looked up at the stars, and for the first time in his life, he didn't wish to be admired. He wished to be good. Several weeks passed, and the whispers about Ethan slowly faded. People began to notice not just his silence, but his sincerity. The boy who once mocked others was now helping classmates, greeting teachers politely, and even standing up for those who couldn't stand for themselves. But deep down, Ethan knew there was still one thing left to do, something that scared him more than any punishment ever could. He had to face everyone. He had to say sorry, not just to Mrs. Hayes, but to everyone who had seen what he had done. One morning, the principal, Mr. Lewis, made an announcement during the school assembly. "Today, one of our students would like to share something important with all of you," he said through the microphone. "Please welcome Ethan Parker." The entire hall went silent. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd as Ethan slowly walked up to the stage. Some students looked curious, others doubtful. A few even smirked, expecting the old Ethan to crack a joke. But when he reached the microphone, he didn't smile. He looked nervous, almost vulnerable, like someone finally ready to tell the truth. He took a deep breath and said softly, "Most of you know who I am, or who I was." The hall was so quiet that even the sound of the ceiling fans could be heard. Ethan continued, his voice trembling at first but growing stronger with every word. "A few weeks ago, I did something terrible. I disrespected someone who deserved nothing but kindness. Mrs. Hayes, the founder of our school. I pushed her, I mocked her, and I laughed at her, all because I thought being loud made me powerful." Gasps moved through the crowd. Some students who hadn't known the full story now sat upright, shocked. Ethan paused, gripping the edge of the podium tightly. "I thought being feared meant being strong, but I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking slightly. I've learned that real strength isn't about hurting others. It's about helping them even when nobody's watching. He took out a small notebook from his pocket, the one Mrs. Hayes had given him, and held it up for everyone to see. This notebook was a gift from Mrs. Hayes. She told me to fill it with lessons from life. So far, I've written 3. He opened the notebook, his fingers trembling slightly. Lesson 1, he read, true strength is kindness. He looked up at the crowd. Lesson 2, mistakes don't define you. What you do after them does. A few teachers nodded quietly, tears welling up in their eyes. And lesson 3, Ethan said, smiling faintly. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's the beginning of strength. He paused, letting the words sink in. The silence in the hall was now filled with emotion. Not judgment, but reflection. I can't erase what I did, Ethan continued, but I can spend the rest of my time here trying to be better. Not just for Mrs. Hayes, but for everyone I've ever hurt, teased, or disrespected. I want to make this place kinder, even in small ways. He took another breath, steadying his voice. So today I'm not asking for applause. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you, all of you, to think before you act. Because sometimes a single second of cruelty can take years to forget. But a single act of kindness can last forever. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, one person began to clap. A soft, single sound that echoed through the hall. It was Mrs. Thompson, his English teacher. Soon another joined in. And then another. Within seconds, the whole hall was filled with applause. Not loud or wild, but warm and genuine. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they weren't from shame. They were from relief, from gratitude, from the strange, peaceful joy that comes when you finally make things right. After the assembly, several students came up to him. Some he had once teased, others who had been afraid of him. One of them, a quiet boy from his math class, said softly, "Thanks, man," for saying what most people are too scared to say. Ethan smiled. "No problem," he said, "just don't make the same mistakes I did." That afternoon, when he walked home, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner. For the first time in a long time, he felt proud of himself, but in a way that didn't need attention. When he reached home, his father was waiting for him in the living room, holding a newspaper. "I saw the school newsletter," his father said with a small smile. "You spoke well today." Ethan looked surprised. "You read it?" "Of course," his father said, putting the paper down. "Your mom and I are proud of you, son." Those simple words hit Ethan harder than any applause. He nodded quietly, a smile breaking across his face. That evening, he returned to the community center. Mrs. Hayes was there, as always, surrounded by children and books. When she saw him, she smiled knowingly. "I heard you gave quite a speech today," she said. Ethan laughed softly. "You heard? News travels fast," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "So, and what lesson did you write next?" Ethan pulled out his notebook and opened to a new page. "Lesson 4, he said, scribbling the words carefully. "Change doesn't start with the world. It starts with you." Mrs. Hayes nodded proudly. "That's a good one." Ethan closed the notebook, smiling. "I'm still learning. And that," she said gently, "is what makes you stronger than you realize." They both stood there, the setting sun glowing through the window, painting everything gold, a perfect ending to a story that had begun with cruelty, but now shone with compassion. Ethan looked out at the sunset and thought to himself, sometimes the biggest victories don't happen when you win over others, but when you finally win over yourself.